Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following.
Many in southwestern Alberta were hit by lots of snow and ice today. We hear from a meteorologist from Environment Canada to find out how long the low-pressure system will be sticking around. Former Reform Party leader Preston Manning has launched a citizen-led inquiry looking into Ottawa's response into the COVID-19 pandemic. And we hear from farmers who explain why sugar beets are so important to the local economy.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Even though the first official day of winter is not until December 21st, it felt a lot like it today in Lethbridge and much of southwestern Alberta with the snow we received. Environment and Climate Change Canada issued a snowfall warning for our region. Many areas in the city saw around 4 centimeters of the white stuff, but much more west of the city, including Waterton Lakes National Park. The snow and ice made for treacherous driving conditions throughout the city and on our highways. Whoop Up Drive in Lethbridge was at a standstill earlier today, and traffic on Bridge Drive and Highway 3 in the city was down to around 30 kilometers an hour. Kyle Fougere is a meteorologist with Environment and Climate Change Canada. He explains where this weather system came from and just how long it will be sticking around southwestern Alberta.
We've got a potent low pressure system that's developed over Montana and is slowly moving to the northeast today and will exit into Saskatchewan by tomorrow. And it's spread a really large area of snow across all of southern Alberta, all the way up towards the Edmonton area. We've seen some pretty significant accumulations today. So far, we've only had 4 centimeters reported at the Lethbridge airport. But to the west, in the Waterton, Pitcher Creek area, we've had reports of 30 to 40 centimeters. And 10 to 15 centimeters is spread over a really large part of southern Alberta. So we have very poor travel conditions today with this snowfall. The heaviest snow is expected to end around midnight tonight as the system departs and moves into Saskatchewan. Well, as the system departs, we're expecting some westerly winds are going to bring in some warmer temperatures by the time Friday arrives, but unfortunately it'll be very short-lived. Another low pressure system is forecast to move through the province this weekend, and so we're expecting some more snow for Saturday into Sunday, but as that system moves out, it's going to drag some really cold Arctic air across the province. So by the time we reach Monday morning, we're likely to be sitting at minus 17 in the Lethbridge area.
BCN's Jeanette Rocher will have a complete look at the extended forecast, along with how the rest of the country is shaping up on Thursday. That's coming up later in our broadcast. Phase 1 of our city's snow routes has officially been declared after the massive dump of snow we received. This means temporary parking will be in effect on all routes for this phase, so the snow plows can clear those areas beginning on Thursday. The city's transportation manager, Darwin Jewell, says they plan to have snow plows out for the next few days to make sure the roads are nice and clear.
The snowfall was significant. It's planned to be significant for the next 24 or 48 hours, and then it'll taper off. We're also understanding it's going to be snowing on Sunday with heavy snowfall on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. So we're anticipating more problems within our conditions of road, and we're ready for it with our equipment. So we'll just have extra people out there.
Jewell says when there's significant snowfall like we received, crews are out working 24 hours a day. Well, the cold and icy temperatures can make for some very slick conditions on the roads. The folks at the AMA are offering some tips to make sure you get to your destination safely. Some of those include having good visibility and practicing safe braking techniques. Ryan Lamont says it's good to have these reminders, especially during major snowfall events.
So being focused on all those skills, those tasks, they are good principles that, we tend to park them in spring when the roads start getting nicer, the sun's coming out, we've got traction and not having to worry about that. So all these winter skills that we spend these winter months developing, they kind of get parked away in spring. And so this first snowfall really it prompts us to kind of dig back and pull those principles and skills out. But they're really important to keep in mind and really just under any driving condition.
Lamont also says it's very important to always drive with your lights on during the snowy and darker months and to have good winter tires on your vehicle. Former leader of the Reform Party of Canada, Preston Manning, held a news conference in Ottawa on Wednesday morning to announce that an independent citizen-led inquiry is launching, looking into the federal government's response into the COVID-19 pandemic. Manning says the harms that Canadians suffered need to be investigated.
This is not harm from COVID. This is harm from the protection measures. Those were in 4 categories: harms to people's health, people on the waiting lines, for example, people that suffered adverse effects from vaccines and so forth, harms due to restrictions of rights and freedoms, social harms, mainly due to social distancing, and of course, economic harms due to the lockdown of the economy.
Manning says more information about the independent citizen-led inquiry into the COVID-19 pandemic response can be found on their website. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre took another shot at the Trudeau Liberals' ArriveCan app, calling it Arrive Scam. Poilievre says the app simply didn't work. He says it wrongly sent thousands of people into quarantine, and Canadians still don't know who got rich from it.
No one has done more to attack workers' rights than the Prime Minister, who eats up their paychecks with 40-year highs in inflation. To $54 million for the Arrive Scam app, an app we didn't need, that didn't work, that sent 10,000 people wrongly into quarantine, and that could have been designed for $250,000 in a weekend, but took $54 million instead. Some of the companies the Prime Minister said got the money said they never received it. It's time for the truth. Will the Prime Minister support our motion to call in the auditors?
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says he would like to see a global minimum price on carbon. Now, the Biden administration in the United States has already said it would not participate in such an initiative. Trudeau says there will be challenges to try and achieve net zero emissions by the year 2050.
I think we all recognize that the biggest obstacle is figuring out how we're all going to live up to our commitments to arrive at net zero emissions by 2050, how we're going to meet our 2030 targets. And we know there are many different approaches that every country is going to have to take to reduce emissions, to decarbonize their economy, to get to net zero. And carbon pricing is one of the most effective and cheapest ways to get there.
Federal opposition parties are making their priorities known ahead of the government's fall fiscal update. The Conservatives are calling on the Liberals to curb new spending, while the NDP has raised concerns about a potential recession next year. Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland is poised to present the fall economic statement in the House of Commons on Thursday. The 5 candidates running for the Alberta constituency of Brooks Medicine Hat, including Premier Daniel Smith, squared off in a debate in Brooks on Tuesday night. The debate was focused on education. Much of the talk was about funding and how each party would support schools following a difficult 3 years during the pandemic. Premier Daniel Smith is trying to win a seat in the legislature in the constituency, where advance voting has already begun. The by-election takes place next Tuesday. Alberta's opposition NDP are calling on the United Conservative government to launch an investigation into the high cost of grocery prices. Agriculture and forestry critic Heather Sweet says large grocery chains are reporting record profits and should be investigated for price gouging and inflation profiteering. She was joined by community and social services critic Marie Renaud, who's urging the government to return to the legislature.
Last month, we saw the overall inflation started to cool, but food prices continue to increase more than 10% month over month. Alberta retail prices show increases of more than 30% in some cases in the year-over-year prices on goods such as vegetable oil, iceberg lettuce, and certain cuts of beef. The price of bread is up nearly 25%, and the butter to put on it has raised over 20%.
We could lower income tax, we could raise benefits, we could increase grants to nonprofits, we could build affordable housing, we could increase rebates, we could freeze tuition, we could cut interest on student loans, and we could certainly put back the cap on insurance.
Sugar beets and the production of sugar is one of the biggest export industries here in southern Alberta. Taber is also home to the only sugar beet refinery in Canada. As BCN's Micah Quinn explains now, farmers and growers in our area explain what exactly sugar beets are and how important they are to our local economy.
I work for the sweetest farmers in Canada. I work for the sugar beet farmers.
Sugar beets are a root crop, and during the first year of growing, they produce a huge root, which is 18 to 20% sugar. The sugar beet is then grown and delivered to the Taber sugar beet refinery to get the sugar out of the beet, which then comes out as white sugar. Melody Garner-Skiba, the executive director of the Alberta Sugar Beet Growers, explains what sugar beets are used for.
So the refined sugar definitely is used in all of your foods and stuff like that. But there's also byproducts that come from a sugar beet. The first one is the pulp, and that's used as livestock feed. So you'll see that being fed to cattle, sheep, horses, a whole myriad of animals. And then there's also molasses that come off of as a byproduct. And that's used for fermentation for the creation of yeast. It's used in alcohol production. You know, there's a lot of distillers out there, craft distillers, that are using it to make some really yummy spirits. So,
according to Garner-Skiba, our country's only trading partner for 100% refined beet sugar is the United States.
Right now, we've got with the CUSMA agreement, so that's the U.S.-Mexico Free Trade Agreement that Canada has, we can export 20,000 tons of sugar. That has to be beet sugar, so it's truly 100% Canadian sugar. And locally, we've got about 200 farm families that are producing this amazing Canadian product.
Kelly Van Ham farms sugar beets out of the Burdett area with K4J Farms Limited. He says inflation has impacted his business in a big way.
Not only supply chains, but also just a direct cost. And so I can tell you by example, last year I bought some batteries, or a battery for my tractor. I need 3 of them, but a battery is about $150. This year, $300. My input costs are up at least 50% on all fronts, and that's the minimum.
If you're out at the grocery store, you can look for the Rogers sugar bags that have a black stamp that start with the number 22. If you purchase one of these bags, you'll be supporting local farm families and buying 100% Canadian product. For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
For educational piece. Thank you, Micah. Operation Red Nose is returning for its 26th year in Lethbridge following a 2-year hiatus. It's dedicated to helping eliminate impaired driving during the Christmas holiday season. Now, if you've had a few too many drinks and need a ride home, a registered volunteer will come down to drive home in your own vehicle. Neil Langevin, the executive director of the University of Lethbridge Pronghorn Athletics, says Operation Red Nose is a fundraising event to help support their teams. Over $815,000 has been generated since its inception, and he says he's hoping it will be successful again this year.
This year, we actually tried to look at it through a completely different lens, and that was solely through community service. We're looking at any donations and our corporate sponsorship as basically bonus for our groups this year. We know coming back after the pandemic, we're not sure, how popular the service will be. In the past, it would be, an annual amount of around between $30,000 and $40,000. That has been generated. We didn't focus on the dollars, but that would be historical.
Operation Red Nose will start on December the 2nd. Volunteers will have to receive a background check from the Lethbridge Police Service to be able to get out and drive. Alberta Health Services Better Choices, Better Health Workshops gets underway next week. Now, it's a program to help people who suffer from chronic diseases and how to manage them. The program is about 2.5 hours in length. Jennifer Steyer, manager for chronic diseases for the South Zone, says programs like this can be very beneficial. She says it's very important that they're readily available.
It does help bring all of those people together who sort of walk the same path. So the idea is that we can connect people together who maybe they don't all live with the same chronic disease. We might have people in those classes, some have diabetes, some have fibromyalgia, some have chronic pain, or any number of different things. But at the same time, they're all sort of walking this path where they live the rest of their lives dealing with something, a health issue. And so this allows for some discussion on how to be able to best manage your health, given that you have these health conditions.
Steyer says the courses are offered either virtually or in person. The Saskatchewan government introduced the Saskatchewan First Act. The province says it confirms Saskatchewan's autonomy and exclusive jurisdiction over its natural resources. Officials say the legislation will help protect the province's economic growth and prosperity from intrusive federal policies that encroach upon their legislative sovereignty. Mitch McAdam, director of the province's constitutional law, says his province is on solid ground with respect to the amendments.
Of course, the federal government could challenge the bill in court, but we feel very confident that the province has the jurisdiction under Section 45 of the Constitution Act 1982 to unilaterally amend its own constitution. So you'll see in the bill that there are 2 different ways that we're doing that. One is by amending the Constitution Act 1867, And there's a part of that act that deals with provincial constitutions. It's the part that Quebec relied on to make their amendment a few months ago. So we would be making an amendment to that part of the act. And also the bill deals with an amendment to the Saskatchewan Act, which we view as part of the constitution of the province as well. So we think we're on solid ground with respect to either and both of those amendments.
Officials say the act will also create an economic impact assessment tribunal that will define and report on the economic impact of federal initiatives on provincial investment and Saskatchewan projects. Once the Emergencies Act had been invoked, Freedom Convoy lawyer Keith Wilson says he told protesters to stay in downtown Ottawa and oppose all COVID-19 restrictions. Wilson told the Public Inquiry today, investigating the use of the act, that he never imagined the police would use force against nonviolent protesting Canadians. He says the protest was completely legal.
At no point did it become illegal. At no point was the Riot Act read as required under the Criminal Code. At no point was any of the legal criteria that are necessary to declare a protest to be unlawful were met. There's no evidence of it. And in fact, counsel for the barrister, Mr. Brendan Miller, has asked a number of police officials, and they have acknowledged they took none of the steps, and the criteria for it to be an illegal protest were never met.
Wilson and one of the convoy organizers, Chris Barber, made a TikTok video to encourage people to come to Ottawa openly, defying the order to leave the area. Each year, Samaritan's Purse launches an initiative that becomes a huge blessing for many families around the world. It is called Operation Christmas Child. It's when people put items in a shoebox, mainly for children in need. Jackie Cadle with the organization says oftentimes these are the first gifts that certain kids have ever received.
For many of them, they have never received a gift of any kind in their lives. And now they're getting a whole box full of gifts. And many times in many different places, children have opened them trying to think, well, do I get to choose which one and what can I keep? And they're just amazed as to what happens when you can have all of it. And they're so astonished. It makes a difference for children who are going to school. Some children cannot go to school.
Make sure you catch the full interview with Jackie Cadle from Samaritan's Purse and BCN's Naveen Day coming up in the second half of our program. Well, it looked a lot like Christmas here in Lethbridge. We saw quite a bit of snow, and the snowfall warning continued for our region. But fortunately, the snow should be tapering off soon. Complete weather details are coming up. You know that tune, Slip Sliding Away? Well, that was basically the case here in southwestern Alberta, not just on the city streets, but on the highways as well. Jeanette Roche is in now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, we had a snowfall warning today with up to 20 centimeters of the white stuff, and more snow's on the way?
Yeah, more snow is on the way this evening, Hal, and it should clear up by morning, giving us a nice reprieve for Thursday with a high of 13 degrees. Not too bad at all. And then beginning late Friday, it's going to start snowing again right through till next Tuesday. We're looking at chances of flurries all those days. High of 6 degrees on Friday, 1 degree Saturday, down to -8. -15 on Monday and -14 on Tuesday. So not only with the snow that is coming, we're also looking at chillier conditions as well. So it almost feels like winter is officially upon us now. Average high for this time of year, 8 degrees, average low, -4. 23 was our high temperature. That would have been nice if it was today, but it was back in 1981. And in 1991, we were looking at -25 degrees on this day. 8:22 is when the sun rose this morning, and the sun set this evening at 6:08 p.m. Look at that. Just like that, we are less than 10 hours of daylight all of a sudden. On the west coast tomorrow, looking at a chance of rain beginning in the afternoon, both in Victoria and Vancouver tomorrow. Victoria's high 7, 6 degrees the high in Vancouver. Also Vancouver expecting 50K winds. -3, the expected high tomorrow in Edmonton with lots of sunshine. A snowfall warning still in effect this evening for Calgary, but should clear up by morning, giving a nice sunny day tomorrow. -3 the high, and with the wind chill, going to feel a little bit chillier than that as well. Saskatoon looking at a 60% chance of snow with -4 the high, -1 the high in Regina, and a 30% chance of flurries, 30% chance of showers in Winnipeg with high of 7 degrees. As we look to the central part of the country, we're seeing much different conditions. 15 the high in Toronto, 17 in Ottawa, same thing for Montreal. These three cities also expecting some 20-degree days coming up later on this week. So must be nice to be in the central part of the country for sure. Much the same also for Atlantic Canada. Beautiful conditions. Sunshine, 13 degrees all the way around. Fredericton, Halifax, Charlottetown looking at a high of 10 degrees tomorrow with sunshine. And the only difference there is we're looking at St. John's, Newfoundland, looking at a 40% chance of flurries tomorrow and up to 70K winds there with a high of 2 degrees. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Are you tired of high energy bills? Today's weather report is brought to you by Ridge Utilities, providing competitive rates for electricity, natural gas, and internet while investing back in communities across southern Alberta.
A new survey says more than 50% of homeowners with a mortgage are concerned about an increase in their payments upon renewal. The study by Leger also found that 52% have a plan in place to deal with higher payments. 38% say they will cut back on spending, and 9% say they will have to dip into their savings. Only 2% said that they would sell their house in light of higher mortgage rates. The survey was released as the Bank of Canada continues its aggressive rate hike campaign to bring inflation under control. Last week, the central bank increased its key overnight rate by 50 basis points to 3.75%. Stocks fell on Wall Street ahead of what traders expect will be another big interest rate increase from the U.S. Federal Reserve. The Fed is due to wrap up a two-day policy meeting that is expected to produce the sixth interest rate increase of the year as it fights the worst inflation in 40 years. Markets will be watching closely to see what Fed Chair Jerome Powell says about the central bank's outlook for how long rates will need to stay high to fight inflation. The Competition Bureau of Canada is making it clear it remains dead set against the $26 billion proposed merger between Rogers and Shaw. The regulatory battle is headed to public hearings next week. The group reiterated its position that the planned sale of Shaw-owned wireless carrier Freedom Mobile to Quebeccor's Videotron is not enough to eliminate its concerns. The Bureau insists the merger would lead to worse services and higher prices for consumers. Rogers is hoping to close the Shaw deal by the end of the year. You know, in the early 16th century, European settlers brought metal trapping devices with them and established the North American fur trade with Europe. Now, the fur trade was the main source of commerce for many settlers and led to colonization. Donald Langkamp is a modern-day fur trapper based in northern Alberta. He says his industry has evolved quite a bit, and fur trapping today has actually become more humane when it comes to the methods they use.
You have to deal with the reality that many people don't want to see animals suffer. And truthfully, trappers don't want to see animals suffer either. So in order to keep this industry alive, we have had to draw up guidelines and pass laws that require every trapper to be trained, pass a course before he can be a trapper, and we are then trained in the use of mandated methods of capturing animals in a way that doesn't make them suffer.
Make sure you catch this intriguing interview with fur trapper Donald Langkamp and BCN's Navi Day coming up after business news. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 240 points on the day to finish at 19,277. The Dow was down 505 points to 32,147. The S&P 500 was down 96 on the day to 3759, and the Nasdaq was down 366 points to 10,524. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 99 cents to 89.36 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 47 cents to 6.19 US. Gold was up 5 cents to 16.3530 US an ounce, and silver was down 40 cents to 19.23 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $12.90 per bushel, barley's at $9.90, canola's at $19.70, and corn is at $12.11 per bushel. Live cattle were down 55 cents to $151.40. Feeder cattle were up $2 to $178.93, and lean hogs were down $1.90 to $83.30. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to $72.92 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, former leader of the Reform Party of Canada, Preston Manning, announced that an independent citizen-led inquiry is launching, and they're looking into the federal government's response into the COVID-19 pandemic. Manning says the harms that Canadians suffered need to be investigated. He says more information about the independent citizen-led inquiry into the COVID-19 pandemic response can be found on their website, nationalcitizensinquiry.ca. Christmas will be here before you know it, and many children around the world are blessed by the Samaritan's Purse Operation Christmas Child campaign. We'll hear more about this initiative in just a moment. Listen, if you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. We'd love to hear from you.
Operation Christmas Child, also known as the Shoebox Campaign, which is a project of the international relief organization Samaritan's Purse. It's become the world's largest children's Christmas project. Joining me from Lethbridge to talk about this is Jackie Cadle. She's the media support team member with Samaritan's Purse. Jackie, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you.
Now, Jackie, for any viewers that may be unfamiliar with it, what is Operation Christmas Child all about?
The mission of Operation Christmas Child is to demonstrate God's love in a tangible way to children in need around the world. So through this project, Samaritan's Purse partners with the local church worldwide, and it shares the good news of Jesus Christ and makes disciples of people around the world.
Excellent. And how many kids in how many different countries have you reached?
Since 1993, more than 198 million children in more than 170 countries and territories have received an Operation Christmas Child shoebox.
Wow. And what are some of the different countries that will receive gifts coming from Canada?
From Canada this year, in the last number of years, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Senegal, Guinea, Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, and Sierra Leone have been in our list for quite a few years. Ukraine had been dropped off, and now Ukraine is back on. And for the first time ever, we're sending shoeboxes to the Philippines.
Wow, that's amazing. And I'm sure it would just be amazing to see the faces light up on these kids' faces. How did the kids and the families react to the gifts? Can you share a story on what kind of impact this makes?
It's just so amazing to see what these kids are getting. For many of them, they have never received a gift of any kind in their lives. And now they're getting a whole box full of gifts. And many times in many different places, children have opened them trying to think, well, do I get to choose which one? And what can I keep? And they're just amazed as to what happens when you can have all of it. And they're so astonished. It makes a difference for children who are going to school. Some children cannot go to school because they don't have the school supplies. Their parents can't afford it. Now they can go to school. And there's so many different stories that we could tell about how a child is the only girl in a family of boys and she wanted just something pink. And she got a shoebox full of pink things. And children in Guyana, they love to play soccer in that country. And in one particular shipment, there were 5 boxes that had soccer balls in them. So, I really believe that this is a ministry that is governed by God, and children receive exactly what they need.
That's amazing to hear. Now, does the shoebox also have an impact on the surrounding community? And does it open doors to bring about some positive change?
Huge. It's the gateway ministry. Lots of times by us being able to come in and deliver gifts to children, it allows for a school to be opened, or it allows for a water well to be dug, or those kinds of impacts. And just physical impacts like that are absolutely huge.
Now, COVID impacted the way we basically did everything when it was during the pandemic. Is COVID still having an effect on the way you're doing the Christmas shoebox campaign? And tell us more about that.
I don't think that that's such a big issue right now because our restrictions have been lifted. I think if anything, we have stopped packing shoe boxes because people thought it wasn't going and people were staying at home. Right now, there is no impact. We're encouraging people to grab some shoe boxes, fill them up, and bring them to their local drop-off center.
And how much time is there for viewers to fill a shoebox? And when is National Collection Week for this year?
National Collection Week is November 14 to 21. And so you have basically 2.5 weeks to try and to fill these shoe boxes. So you have some time.
Okay, great to hear. And then what kinds of things should we put in the shoebox?
School supplies are always great. So a pencil case with pencils and pens and crayons and an eraser and those kinds of things, a ruler, all of those things are really good. Hygiene items are also very good. A toothbrush, a bar of soap, a face cloth, those are good. And the crowning item is always a new toy. So a new toy of something, a puzzle, some marbles, a doll, something like that.
So you mentioned the toy as being the real centerpiece of the shoebox contents. Can you give us some idea of what kinds of gifts are really like the wow gifts that really light up the children's faces?
Stuffies. There's nothing better than to put a stuffy right at the top of the box. The other thing that I would strongly encourage people to do is to write a letter. I pack shoe boxes with my grandchildren, and I help them to write a letter, and we take a photo and we add that to the bottom of the picture or to the letter, and we put that into every shoebox so that they have a connection to someone who is blessing them.
And are there any items that we should not pack?
Yes, anything liquid. So don't put in a tube of toothpaste, no shampoos or lotions, those kinds of things. No candies. We think that candies would be a great thing, but if these boxes are kept in storage for a short time, it can draw ants and those kinds of things. And nothing used. Everything in the shoebox should be a new item.
Okay. And can you explain how it works to pack boxes online through www.packabox.ca?
It's beautiful. You just go on to that website that you just mentioned. You put in your information and they give you you can choose your budget to work with. You can choose what you want to do. So you don't even ever have to leave the house. You can just go onto that website, put in your personal information and choose the items from there, and they will pack the box for you at the Calgary Distribution Center.
Well, that's amazing for people that are just really, really busy and they just don't have a way to, they want to help out and they want to be a blessing this year, but I mean, time is of the essence.
Exactly.
And I understand that we should also include a $10 donation to cover the costs to get the shoebox to the children. How would we make that donation? Is it cash, check, online? And what happens if we forget to do this? Will the shoebox still get there?
Absolutely. The shoe boxes are going to go whether or not the $10 is in there. And you can do any of those things, cash, check, or you can make your donation online. I know several people who are doing a number of shoe boxes. So if you're doing like 10 shoe boxes, you can do one donation online for $120 and then you're done. When the boxes go to the distribution center, all the boxes are opened and they look for those cash donations and those get put into a secured lockbox at the distribution center.
Now, I'm told that there's also a voluntary Bible study course called The Greatest Journey that's made available for the kids and families afterwards. Talk about that and what the response has been like.
That's where the big difference comes in, is when these kids they're offered to take that course. They don't have to, but they're given, it's a 12-lesson course that talks about different stories in the Bible and scripture memorization. And the goal of them for that program is for them to become followers of Jesus Christ. At the end of that 12-week Bible lesson, their family is invited to come. They're allowed to invite up to 9 people to come to a graduation ceremony. And at that great graduation ceremony, the parents and the family that has come also have the opportunity to learn about Jesus Christ. And that's where the numbers just get huge. Over 30.9 million children have enrolled in the Greatest Journey since 2009.
That's amazing. Wow.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow. Now, the sad reality is that there's more needy kids than there are shoe boxes. So how do you decide which children get a box?
We partner with these communities, the countries that I just mentioned. We partner with churches and community centers there. Churches are preferable. And then if a pastor in the Philippines was to say, I have a need, and they can tell us whether they need 100 boxes or 300 boxes, and we provide them with what they need for their community. So the local communities decide how many children are in need.
Wow. And for our viewers, time is running out. A reminder that National Collection Week for 2022 will end on Sunday, November 20th. People in Lethbridge can drop off boxes at Park Meadows Baptist Church or downtown at Fresh Life Church. Jackie, how do viewers in other areas find out where their specific drop-off location is?
You can go to SamaritansPurse.ca/drop-off locations. You put in your postal code, and it will tell you where the nearest drop-off location is to you.
Well, that's amazing. We have a little bit of time left, Jackie. Is there anything else that you want to talk about? Anything that we haven't asked you yet? The floor is all yours.
One of the greatest experiences in my life was to be able to go on a shoebox distribution in Costa Rica. It was fabulous to be able to meet those people. I think that the thing that stood out for me so much was that they were so happy. They have next to nothing, and they were so happy. They had a little dance that they loved to do in Costa Rica, and they wanted to welcome us with this little dance. And these kids are like 6 to 12 years old, and they're doing like their local line dance. One of the kids was wearing this pair of huge size 11 men's rubber boots. And I just asked one of the interpreters, why is that? Why is he wearing those boots? Because it was his turn that day to wear the only pair of shoes that the entire family had.
Wow.
And yet the joy on their faces and the freedom to be able to pray, the teachers led them in the Lord's Prayer at the school. And it was beautiful to just be in that kind of a community where they were so happy and they had so little. And the impact that that was going to make on those kids, we gave them soccer balls and we played soccer with them and we blew bubbles outside with them and did face painting. And we had such a great day. And it was all about sharing the love of Jesus with these kids.
That's amazing. Now you're talking about all this impact having on families in developing countries. Like, what kind of impact has this had on you?
It makes me so grateful for everything I have. And it just makes me want to pack more boxes every year because we want to reach more people. It's one way that we can so simply and for so little cost, we can fill a shoebox and impact someone's life for Jesus Christ for forever.
Well, that's all the time we have for today, Jackie. We really appreciate having you on the show today.
It's been my pleasure.
Jackie Cadle is a media support team member with Samaritan's Purse. One of the great things about Alberta is all the wild open spaces. And while it may seem uncommon, there still is a call of the wild here in Alberta, just as there still is a fur trade and Albertans who live on the land and spend their time in the wilderness with no coffee shop or cell phone signal for hundreds of kilometers. One such Albertan is Donald Langkamp and his wife Nikia. They have a YouTube channel called The Way to Native Chronicles, showcasing their time in the wildlands of Alberta as fur trappers. Donald, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
So let's get started, Donald. How did the two of you get started in spending time in the wild areas of our province?
Well, a lot of it stems from the fact that my wife, she's First Nations from northern Alberta, Denetha, and we met in 1975 and got married. And she comes from a family that was raised, made their entire income basically from trapping. So her father was uh, a, a trapper, very skilled one, had his own trap line. They grew up in log houses. A lot of stuff that seems very ancient was not all that long ago. So coming from that background, when we got married, she actually had her treaty rights taken away from her because back in '75, if a non-native man married a native woman, then she would lose all her rights.
Wow.
So that resulted in about 10 years sort of turmoil of being basically not a band member anymore. And in 1985, I think it was, Bill C-10 reestablished the women's rights to retain their native status. So she almost kind of went back to it with a vengeance to really help get herself established again in her culture. And I've always been very much for that too. So we've engaged in hunting and later on in trapping, and it's been very important for also keeping her native crafts alive. She sells makes moccasins and native crafts for many people and tans their own moose hides using the traditional method. So all these things, they require those natural products from the wilds, like the furs for the fur trim and stuff like that. So we got to the point where you're saying, we should just get our own trap line and trap our own pelts. And we've already been for many years getting our own moose every year. So it's really keeping the culture alive a lot. And as far as trapping goes, I believe the Alberta government really tries to promote the retention of native culture by making sure that all the trap lines don't go to other people. So it wasn't too hard to get a trap line.
And so that's some interesting history that you just shared there. But Donald, how long have you and your wife been working your trap line?
We've been doing trap lines for about 5 years. This one that we have, we've had it for 3 years though. So we're actually still in very much of a building up stage in it. And the trap line, because it's trap line that we have, is located about pretty much 3 kilometers off any main road. So that makes access to it quite challenging, and that's sort of where it ties in with the government's decision to start removing all these roads that are there, because we got a cabin now 3 kilometers into the bush, and it's quite challenging to get to. We're not getting any younger. My wife's 71 and I'm 67. So we have to trek through some substantial rough territory to get to our cabin now, and which is made a whole lot easier if you can drive in there, because there is a road going right up to the cabin.
Now, you work with furs as a fur trapper, and I remember as a child living in Winnipeg, there would be retail stores that sold furs, fur coats, but I haven't seen anything in retail for decades. Is there still a strong market for furs?
Yeah, the market for furs, that's a really good point you bring up, because like when my wife's father was earning a living for the family back in before the 1970s. He passed away just a few years ago, and he was 99. Trapping was really quite a lucrative industry. He made really good money being a trapper. So I mean, they weren't rich, but you could make a good living. And nowadays, the market is so depressed. I think a lot due to social pressures and things like that. That you can hardly, well, you can't earn a living doing it anymore, except for a few exceptions. But even those are being wiped out. Like there used to be a company that used a Canadian company that used coyote furs, and under pressure from the woke crowd, I guess, or whatever you call them, they finally canceled that too. They get pressured into using fake fur, and everybody says it's just as good, but it's not nearly the same thing as real fur. So these types of things have really crushed a lot of Native communities in their form of ability to have employment, because these places are remote, and it's not like you can get a job at a 7-Eleven. It's really been unfortunate.
So you've mentioned how social pressures have really affected your industry. Donald, have you had any run-ins with animal rights activists or organizations such as PETA, and what have those interactions been like?
No, I guess maybe they're scared of me. I don't know. I never have, to be honest. Um, and But I mean, we don't run in the same circles either. So I'm sure if made a big show of it downtown or something like that, I would get some interactions. In our case, what we do is and it's partly true, I think, because there is some, even among such people, there is a respect for Native culture and the rights of Indigenous people. And my wife, being First Nations, we use these hides. We don't sell them. We use them to make native crafts, which is really an important aspect of helping to uh, preserve and pass on the native culture. So maybe we're given a little bit of a break that way.
So it sounds like some activists know that there is a line between preserving Indigenous culture and social justice. Now, you mentioned before the interview that there's been advancements in your industry that makes the fur industry appeal to European markets. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, that's a good point, because yeah, it's not like the trappers have been blind to the concerns of Canadians, and even more so, being very conscious of the concerns of the rest of the world, Europe in particular. I would say, you have to deal with the reality that many people don't want to see animals suffer, and truthfully, trappers don't want to see animals suffer either. So, in order to keep this industry alive, we have had to draw up guidelines and pass laws that require every trapper to be trained, pass a course before he can be a trapper, and we are then trained in the use of mandated methods of capturing animals in a way that doesn't make them suffer. So, if I had like the leg hold traps are a very common one, and they're looked down a lot on. But the leg hold traps that we use nowadays are meant to just hold the animal. So I can take a leg hold trap that we use, that we have to use now, according to law, just stick my hand in it and let it snap on my hand. It's not going to hurt me. All it's going to do is just going to grab my hand so that I can't get it away. And that, combined with the fact that the laws also mandate that you have to check your traps every day, that ensures that an animal's not going to suffer. So they're not going to suffer from the trap holding their leg. It's not like a lot of people have this misconception and it was that way a bit in the old days, that animals would suffer a lot, but they don't anymore if we follow the proper procedures. And we've had to follow those procedures quite. We probably want to anyways, but out of necessity, because the Europeans would not buy furs from us anymore if they didn't think the furs were harvested in an ethical manner. So this industry has really changed from top to bottom. But even in spite of that, we still have the depressed prices in the fur market, because that impression is out there. So we're doing the best we can, but the truth is sometimes just getting its pants on when the lie is run around the world already, right?
So it sounds like there's still a lot of like misinformation and really like outdated stigma related to fur trapping.
Yeah, it's basically outdated information that is leading people astray, and so I'm not ascribing malice to everyone who disagrees with trapping. I think they're just quite often uninformed. They don't realize how much this industry has changed and how much emphasis we put on proper and safe trapping.
And you also talked about keeping trapping alive. So do you feel that these skills are important to share with a younger generation? You do have a lot of subscribers on your YouTube channel.
Yes, it's very important to share these skills. Also, as a way of it gives you a purpose for being outdoors too, because it's one thing to sit around the house and look at nice nature shows and stuff like that, but it's another thing to actually understand the animals so well that you sort of know what they're going to do next, and that really draws you into a closer connection with nature. Also, for First Nations people, uh, it's something that we really have to work on getting them involved in and continuing on, which is unfortunately really hurt by the fact that the money to be made off furs is so low now. But from a cultural background, like trapping, the trap lines that were established before the treaties were written really established the territories of the various native peoples in Canada. That's how we have to when the treaties were being figured out, the government had to go back and see, well, whose trap line was this, and they had them all laid out and everything already. So all these things are just so central and crucial to our history and culture as well, especially in the case of First Nations.
Now, one of the videos that was posted on your YouTube channel in July, it had over like 200,000 views. You talk about the Trudeau Liberals' push to ban not only handguns, but also rifles that are primarily used for hunting. Now, as a person who regularly uses firearms, what concerns you the most about the current and future bans of these tools?
Well, that's a big one. Yeah. I mean, that is something that's such a frustration for Canadian gun owners. And people who spend time in the outdoors, because we feel like there's just a total disconnect between the urban centers like Toronto and Montreal and the West. It's really feeding into the whole um, Western alienation thing, where uh, people don't appreciate that for us uh, rifles and even handguns have a use. Like as a trapper, I have an authorization to use a handgun, because you can't lug a rifle around. So there's a real use for handguns, both for dispatching animals and also for personal protection, because you're carrying stuff around in the bush and you're working with your hands. You can't have a rifle close by. So uh, for for all of our rights to be basically stomped on for the sake of some idiotic gangbangers on the Toronto streets and stuff like that, it's uh, it's really uh, it's really frustrating, because on the one hand we're always saying, well, we don't demonize a whole class of people, like let's say call all Muslims terrorists because there's a few bad actors among them, and that's right, we shouldn't do that. But then if there's a few idiots that are using guns illegally, which no law is going to prevent them from doing anyways, then you're going to paint with a broad brush all gun owners in Canada as being dangerous, and we have to be protected from. The government is really just relying on fear tactics and picking out somebody to be a boogeyman, as I've mentioned in my videos before. So they have such a bad situation politically as they look ahead to what's going to happen in the next election. They have to uh, pick somebody to rally everybody against, and it's really a sad state of affairs. The rifles that they're thinking of banning, or that they have banned already, uh, and are going to ban, are going to include a lot of these rifles that the First Nations people use too. And I think we have to always keep in mind the fact that these treaties that we signed with First Nations included the guarantee to continue hunting and practicing their traditional ways, which is very important, because they actually are stakeholders in in uh, in seeing what happens for destruction of the environment, but also they have a right to have firearms in order to hunt. Some people say, "Oh, well, they can go back to bows and arrows," but they don't know their history. Treaties were signed at times when First Nations, at least around here, they all had rifles and stuff already. So there's a whole there's a lot of frustration here among the people I know that we've invested a lot of money in our handguns and our rifles and shotguns, and that the government can come along and take away property that has been lawfully obtained sets a precedent that is really scary. Trudeau has already shown his willingness to step into our bank accounts. That should be a red flag for all of us, that he can just freeze our bank accounts, do all kinds of things if they don't agree with us politically. So now we have the guns coming along. They're going to take those away. Once the government should be around to protect people's personal property, not to take it away. And if they can do this, even those people out there that don't have guns, they should be worried.
Well, Donald, thank you so much for your perspective, as well as an Indigenous perspective on fur trapping, as well as also gun control. But unfortunately that's all the time we have for today, and only got through a few of the questions. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, and thank you as well. I really appreciated talking to you.
That was Donald Langkamp, and you can watch more from him and his wife Nakia out on their trap line on their YouTube channel, The Way to Native Chronicles. I'm Naveen Day, and on behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.